1,000 years ago, China invented paper money. 600 years before Europe. Then they abandoned it, and Europe picked it up and built modern finance with it. How does the civilization that invented paper money? And I'm going back to silver. Let's break it down.
In Song Dynasty, Sichuan, a merchant needed to travel to the next town to close a deal. Piled in front of him were strings of iron coins, each string weighing over 50 pounds. To make the trip, he had to hire porters, rent horses, and haul hundreds of pounds of metal over mountain passes, watching for bandits the entire way. This wasn't trade. This was manual labor. Then someone solved the problem with a piece of paper. But what happened next was even stranger. The civilization that invented this piece of paper destroyed it with its own hands more than once. 16 wealthy merchants in Chengdu came together and created a system. You deposit your iron coins at our shop and we give you a paper certificate. Take that paper to another shop in the next town and you can redeem it for coins anytime. That piece of paper was called Jiaozi. No emperor ordered it, no government planned it. It was entirely the creation of private merchants trying to solve a very practical problem. Moving money was just too heavy. And the system had a built-in safety valve. If any shop issued paper it couldn't honor, that shop's reputation was finished. And so was its business. The reason Jiaozi worked for decades wasn't because of the paper itself. It was because the cost of breaking trust fell directly and immediately on the person who broke it. The first paper currency in human history was not a product of power. It was a product of trust. Then the government took notice. Around 1024, the Northern Song court nationalized Jiaozi, establishing a government office to issue it under state control. On the surface, this looked like regulation. But underneath, a fundamental structural shift had just occurred. The power to issue currency moved from many competing merchants into the hands of a single issuer, and the market could no longer punish that issuer. When a merchant printed too much paper, the consequence was his own bankruptcy. When the court printed too much paper, the consequence was borne by everyone else. This was not a moral failing. This was a structural outcome. When state finances tightened in the late Northern Song, the court discovered a method 10,000 times more convenient than raising taxes: print more. Jiaozi flooded the economy. The amount of money on paper kept growing, but what that money could actually buy kept shrinking. Trust collapsed. The Southern Song renamed it Huizi, walked the exact same path, and met the exact same end. Paper money died for the first time on the very soil where it was born. But the story didn't end there. The Mongols arrived. After Kublai Khan established the Yuan dynasty, he did something no one in human history had ever attempted. He built a purely paper currency economy. Gold and silver were banned from circulation. The entire empire ran on paper notes alone. In its early years, the system worked remarkably well. It unified currency, boosted cross-regional trade, and simplified taxation. Marco Polo happened to arrive in China during this period. In his travel accounts, he described what he saw with a tone of near disbelief. The Great Khan took bark from mulberry trees, pressed it into sheets, stamped them with his seal, and these pieces of paper could buy anything in the world. In Marco Polo's European experience, money had to be gold or silver. It had to have weight you could see and feel. But in Yuan China, the emperor's command was the weight. This meant the value of currency no longer came from scarcity. It came from power. And power, by its very nature, has no built-in limit. Marco Polo brought this story back to Europe in his writings. Europeans who read it thought he was lying. But what Marco Polo didn't see was this. A few decades after he left China, the later Yuan emperors began printing money at a frantic pace to fund military campaigns and extravagance. Prices soared to the point where ordinary people could no longer survive. The collapse of paper money directly accelerated the fall of the Yuan dynasty. Starving peasants and displaced families became rebel armies. Among those rebels was a man named Zhu Yuanzhang. He was the lowest-born emperor in Chinese history. He had been a beggar. He had been a monk. He had witnessed firsthand the human catastrophe caused by the yuan's paper money collapse. You could say inflation itself pushed him onto the path of revolution. But power gave him a new weapon, the printing press. After founding the Ming dynasty, Zhu Yuanzhang issued the Deming Bao Chao, forced the entire nation to use it, and banned all private transactions in gold and silver. What made it worse was that the court only issued the notes, but refused to accept them back. Citizens could not use Bao Chao to pay their taxes. This was the government announcing to everyone's face, "I demand that you trust this paper, but I myself do not trust it." Zhu Yuanzhang was not ignorant of the risks of paper money. He understood them better than anyone alive. But the rules hadn't changed. What changed was his position within those rules. He was no longer the one who bore the risk. He had become the one who could transfer that risk to everyone else. Within decades, the Deming Bao Chao depreciated to barely 1 or 2% of its face value. Eventually, even the court stopped mentioning it and quietly allowed the nation to return to a silver economy. An emperor who had been personally forged by the disaster of paper money, once handed the power to print it, walked the exact same path. From the northern Song to the southern Song, from the Yuan to the Ming. 4 dynasties, 4 attempts, the same script every time. Private invention, state takeover, monetary expansion, collapse of trust, retreat to metal. Who prints the money doesn't matter. What matters is who pays the price. When too much is printed, when merchants controlled it, the market answered that question automatically. You print it, you pay for it. Once the state took over, that answer disappeared, because the ones paying the price were never the ones doing the printing. Paper money doesn't need greater power behind it. Quite the opposite. It needs a mechanism that forces power itself to bear the consequences. And in 1,000 years of imperial rule in China, no such mechanism ever existed. Later, the concept of paper money made its way to Europe. Over several centuries, Europeans worked out an institutional arrangement. Separate the power to print money from the power to spend it, and let a relatively independent financial system hold currency issuers accountable. They weren't smarter. They were simply forced to confront the question that China never resolved. How do you make the people who issue money also bear the consequences? 1,000 years ago, 16 merchants in Sichuan solved the problem of iron coins being too heavy with a single piece of paper. They probably never imagined that this small invention would become the boldest collective experiment in human history, convincing everyone to agree that a piece of paper can represent wealth. Today, every wallet in the world is filled with paper. From Chengdu to London to New York, behind every one of those pieces of paper, there has always been only one question. Does the person who prints it have to answer for what it costs?